Hi guys, my name is Ben Gilad. I'm the founder of the Academy of Competitive Intelligence from 1999, and before that I was a professor of strategy at Rutgers University, and before that I was in police intelligence, and if you hear my accent, I was born in Israel. I'm now an American, but most Americans who meet me immediately think I was with the Mossad. So if I say I wasn't, they don't believe me. If I say I was, then I'm an idiot because I should be killed. So I just leave it, but the truth is my background in intelligence started with the police. I was a lousy police intelligence officer. I was a great teacher of strategy, so I decided to combine both and started the Academy of Competitive Intelligence. And with me is Jay Nakagawa. He will introduce himself.
Thank you, Ben, and hello to everybody on this recording. As Ben mentioned, I'm Jay Nakagawa, and a little bit about my background. I was a product manager for 23 plus years, and for the last 13 years, I've been leading a competitive intelligence team with a large company. And it's really interesting because after I took the ACI courses with Ben, I wanted to also teach. That's been something that's been on my life calendar for a long time. Joined as a faculty member and have developed a few courses, and I'm pleased to be here. I'm also the former chairman of the SCIP organization, and I think that's probably one of the topics of this discussion today. And with that, for those of you interested, go look at my LinkedIn, and you'll see my sordid history there.
Sordid history. No, well, okay. I don't think there's anything sordid about you, but you in the dialect of Yiddish, which I don't speak, but as Jewish I know from some sources, you're a mensch. And a mensch is the opposite of sordid. But okay. So yeah, the topic of discussion today, I mean, this conversation is supposed to flow. We have no script. I'm consider myself a provocative thinker because I can allow it. I mean, I own my own company. Nobody can fire me, and I don't give a damn about what most people think anyway. Jay has to be a little more careful and more diplomatic. He's a corporate player, and he survived corporate for so many years. You know, the guy has skills that I can only envy. I would last about 5 seconds in corporate. So the discussion will flow freely, no script. The idea is to talk about competitive intelligence and strategy and a bit about life. I wish we could actually talk 100% about politics, but I don't know why would you be interested in our opinion about politics, so we'll stick to competitive intelligence. The focus today is going to be perhaps on the future of competitive intelligence. And I think I'm going to be more pessimistic than Jay. Jay is optimistic by nature. But I wrote a few books on competitive intelligence when I was younger, and then I wrote a few books when I got older. And my tone got darker and darker as I got older. But it has always been a fight between those who think that intelligence is synonymous with information and data, and those who think intelligence is a leap from information and data. And I remember, I'll go back to the topic on the table, which is Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals, the late Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals. Today it doesn't exist, something else exists, we'll talk about it. But back in the early days, I think it was in the Jurassic era, a guy by the name of Ken Sauka, a colleague and friend of mine, and I wrote a piece for then SCIP magazine, in which we said there is a battle of titans. On the one hand, the information practitioners, and on the other, the intelligence analyst, because intelligence is always the product of analytical thinking. It's not the data. And at that time, which was many, many decades ago, already the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals, which at that time was still a membership-run organization and quite popular, it was already drifting toward information practitioners. And we warned in that piece that that drift, if it continues, is going to take the essence of intelligence out of the discipline. Lo and behold, fast forward, and today, the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals is no longer. Instead, they call themselves, what do they call themselves?
The Strategic Consortium.
Strategic Consortium of Intelligence Professionals. So I'm going to stop here before I get real nasty, and I'm going to give it to the former chairman of the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals. After he left, they changed it to this Davos-based global forum of world leaders. But I'm going to give it back to Jay to talk a little bit about what he sees as the future of competitive intelligence and where the battle lines are being drawn.
Okay, so very thought-provoking. There have been, from my standpoint as the former chairman and also a practitioner myself, what I'm seeing is that CI as a profession, contrary to maybe your point of view, is growing, but it's growing very slowly. It's the age-old problem of CI having credibility with the executive ranks, but that is slowly changing, I think, over time. In certain organizations, probably more in the medium business side too versus the enterprise, because enterprise just move very slowly. I think one of the things that I've observed, and you and I have discussed privately, is that the practice of competitive and strategic intelligence is moving from being solely within the discipline of the CI practitioner and more into being parts of other jobs such as product management. That's where I first got my exposure to competitive intelligence, having to figure out the competitor strategy, figure out how to beat them. And, you know, I'm ashamed to say that I have a couple of business degrees and I didn't remember anything about Porter's Five Forces. But I think part of that is because, you know, in college, you never actually apply it to a real world situation. I think that's what makes ACI so valuable is you actually take the discipline and make the students apply it to real world situations. That's where it goes from being theoretical to being practiced. But with that said, my point is that CI is becoming more of an integrated part of different disciplines like product management, brand management, you know, as the category management, Procter & Gamble type of people, and other disciplines is becoming embedded in that. So it's not a full-time job, which is not why it's not recognized as competitive intelligence per se, because it's part of a broader scope of a job. But I think it's out there. I think it's growing. And part of what I'm doing with my various memberships, like I'm a member of the Product Development and Management Association, the PDMA group, really focused on product development, product management, is to help take the word of CI within those disciplines because they do it, but they don't understand it. My job is to help them better understand the role of CI in their professions.
Well, you get no argument from me, but as a training organization, we started by focusing on the full-time job of CI because they need all the depth.
Yes.
And over time, we kind of drifted a lot due to your influence in recent years. We kind of drifted toward, yeah, it's a skill. It's not necessarily a profession, but you need it in all kind of jobs that are market-facing, that are competitors-facing, that are customers-facing, whatever. Fine. Those product management groups, product marketing groups, some institute of product management, etc., they started offering their own version of competitive intelligence training. I don't know if you can talk to that, but the question is, what do you think about those training? And can an organization that since 1999 focused on competitive intelligence bring anything to those people? Do they need the depth of competitive intelligence that we give to the professionals?
So first, let me answer your question. The answer is absolutely yes. It's needed. It's wanted. Where I see the changes have been coming is that as a product, and I'll use product management since that's my background. I will contend that there are programs out there put on by people like the Pragmatic Institute. And they're great programs for product marketing, product management, even product development. And they teach the basics of product management, product development from an internal and external standpoint. So it's views of how do you get the job done? What techniques do you use? There's one little module offered by Pragmatic which talks about competition. In a similar vein, PDMA in their body of knowledge has a very short section within their body of knowledge for new product development professionals which covers competition. And so while it's mentioned, it's almost thought of as a byproduct or in passing. And part of what I recognize now, looking back on my career as a product manager, is that once a product is defined, released into development for their hands to take forward, the rest of the time by most product managers spent on competition. How do you beat the competition? How do you figure out what they're doing? How do you figure out how to combat their claims versus your claims? And so I'll contend that while it's given very short airtime in the trainings, once a release is done, 60 to 70% of a product manager's time is done looking at and analyzing the competition, figuring out how to beat them.
Okay, but that sounds very tactical, which means you give them the product is already developed, they probably have some but not major influence on the product designers to begin with. Some companies claim about the integration of product management, and I don't buy any notion of integration in the big enterprises, but assuming that they get the product, these are the cards, and they need to know how to play, there is something called product strategy, which means they can think strategically about it.
Yes.
But in most companies, that doesn't take backward to the idea that maybe the products you design and produce and develop should also be influenced by your analysis of a competition. Who does that?
That's the responsibility of the product manager. So there's a dichotomy that's occurring within product management today as a discipline, and I'll spare you the long version of my diatribe. Okay. But essentially, I grew up in an era, and it's like you had to walk uphill to school and then walk back home uphill as a child. But product management, as it was thought of 20 years ago today, was all-encompassing. So the practice I grew up under required us to understand the market landscape, to understand the competitors, the potential competitors, anticipate their moves, and build a product strategy along with the product itself to go to market, to be successful. And I've got a pretty good track record in that from my standpoint. Today, a lot of product managers, I will contend, are really more like project managers or program managers. They focus on a specific area, and once the original strategy is laid out, they never go back to validate product requirements, market changes. And so what I'm trying to do through my association with people like PDMA is to interject some of that strategic thinking back into the process, because I see it lacking. And this isn't just as where I'm, where I am employed today. As the former chair of SCIP, I see it across different organizations, regardless of the product, regardless of the company's business. And from a PDMA standpoint, having gone to last year's conference and talked with a number of people, there were several hundred people there, talking with them, they have the same challenges. So we've lost something essential from a competitive analysis and strategic understanding of the competition in the disciplines. And part of what I'm trying to do is help bring that back.
Okay. Assuming that we can somehow bring it back. I'm skeptical. I have a column on LinkedIn called Skeptical Analyst. Assuming we can bring it back to some strategic element of it. How much influence do product managers even have on top management? The reason I'm asking is my next column on the LinkedIn will be about the demise of Pepsi. I mean, Pepsi is not really demise, but my God, they went from number 2 to number 4 behind Mountain Dew and behind Dr. Pepper. Who the hell drinks Dr. Pepper, for God's sake? Maybe, Generation Z. Or what comes after Generation Z? I'm wondering. What would it be? I think we're done with the alphabet, so what will be the next generation? Maybe there won't be any. It will be the Generation AI. So I was looking at the case study of Pepsi, which is a fantastic case study because they have the most sophisticated marketing machine, like all big enterprise in the food processing, beverages, etc. And they use AI, and they use the best advertising agencies, and they advertise on the football. They manage their products the way you describe it, with all the tools available. What they don't do is go back and ask, do we need those products?
Yes.
Why is the market changing, taking us out of the competition? So now comes Elliott, the active investment, and says to top management, get the hell out of here. You don't know what you're doing, and you need to do better. So what I'm asking is, we are not Elliott, I wish we were, but in our little corner of the world in which we always talk about competition, competing, we haven't really made a dent in the idea that starts at the MBA level even, that competition is not something that you teach, and it's not something that you focus on specifically. It comes with everything else that you're doing, which is what you're describing. You're a product manager, okay, so yes, there is competition, but nobody teaches you how to, I wouldn't say outsmart them, I don't believe in that, but at least how to survive them, maybe how to be step ahead for a while. Nobody teaches it. Why is this? I mean, corporations lose billions, CEOs, tenure is down to 2.5 years, and they don't learn. It's like, let's see if you can compete. I don't get it. What's your experience being in an enterprise company? Anybody talks about how to compete? Is there even a notion of some people are skillful at that, some people are not? Or is it assumed you'll compete?
Well, one of the things, and I know you and I talked about this back when we were doing our session back in Colorado earlier this year, is that large companies in particular suffer from that market myopia that was coined, back in the early 60s by Theodore Levitt. And as companies grow large, they focus less on the customer. And this is the thing Clay Christensen also talks about in the Innovator's Dilemma, is that when you start turning from understanding the market, the customer requirements, the strategy to succeed in that marketplace, you start becoming inwardly focused on things such as how many patents do we file this year? What processes do we have internally that make us sound good? What is our NPS score? When you start turning on an inward focus versus an external focus, I think that's when the large corporations lose their edge. That's why, there was an article on LinkedIn a couple of years ago where somebody was talking about the large food companies like Mondelez and others really gobbling up the market. And the basic premise behind that article is, oh, woe is me because we're losing innovators in the market. And the guy said, no, that's not true. And as you teach at ACI, the purpose behind a large company is to create economies of scale, to create efficiency. And so he said, the little companies and the innovators are not dead. They're just bypassing all the bullshit of the large companies and their processes and attacking the market, finding the right niches, and delivering products to the market that people want. And it's after they become successful that they get acquired and incorporated into the larger machines for the economies of scale. So I truly believe that there are companies, and it's in the form of startups, even in the high-tech world. The startups are the ones who are unbridled by their customers. They're free to explore the market. They're free to look at what do customers really want. It's like the old saying says, if somebody says, well, that's interesting, that's not a buying signal, where can I get it? It really is a buying signal. So the startups are the ones who are looking for that, where can I buy this? Because this is a great idea. If you think about I read Tony Fadell's book called Build, and Tony was the father of the iPod, the iPhone, the Nest thermostat. And the Nest thermostat was particularly interesting because he and his wife had a cabin, I'm assuming up around Lake Tahoe, and Tony was going like, rather than get up to the cabin and having to turn the heat up and having to stay in sleeping bags all night before it warms up, why don't I create a thermostat that any dummy can install on their own? They don't need an HVAC person. That I can control from my iPhone, turn it up so that when I get up to my cabin, it's warm. That's the type of ideas that get spawned, but you're never going to find that in a large corporation because by the very nature of size, they cannot innovate like that.
So what's the use of competitive intelligence for large corporations? I mean, we are supposed to be the ones
Right.
who generate insight. There is a gap, there is an opportunity, never mind the risk. Everybody understand, fine. We are the bad news bearer all the time, but we are also the ones who are supposed to say there is a gap there. And the market research people, and I work with those large enterprises from Procter & Gamble to Johnson & Johnson
Yep.
to all of them, Pfizer, etc. They focus, in the market research, they focus on all the techniques. They say what customers tell them.
Yes.
What you describe is not what customers tell the guy who went with Nest, but what he saw was missing in the market. Customers didn't even know it's possible.
Yes.
So
That's
the
correct.
question is, what's the point of competitive intelligence if management is focused on managing their current portfolio, just making sure maximizing your return from that, but never look for gaps, never look for blind spots, which is my favorite
Yeah.
term. Why do we even offer competitive intelligence training to the poor people?
Because there are people like me that live in large companies who think we can make a difference. And the thing we battle, and you talk about this all the time in your blind spots, the thing we battle most often is status quo.
Right.
Because if you're successful, you don't have to be wildly successful, but they want to maintain that status quo. They're comfortable. You can't get fired for maintaining the status quo, and I think that's the crux of the issue. Is large corporations get used to that. They're used to the compensation package. They don't want to rock the boat. And so by definition, a large company tends to, and there are exceptions to it, but large companies tend to stifle creation, and therefore they want the competitive data, but as you know, they want it because of confirmation bias. They want to understand that what they're hearing from their competitive teams reinforce what their beliefs are, not what the market is really asking for.
Well, that's natural. I mean, nobody
Yeah.
wants to be told, especially not people at the top who are very powerful, that their ideas about the market are either obsolete or are diverging from somebody else's opinion. And you can see it in every major decision that are in war games, which I run. You can see how management have their concepts and they'll accept some feedback from people as long as it doesn't break the major hub beliefs. They believe the market is going to be like
Correct.
this and going that. And what you're talking about, I love the theme of the anti-status quo discipline. Maybe Skip should have been status quo breaker instead of consortium of whatever they call themselves. But I love the idea of, I'm thinking as you're talking, maybe the Academy should offer a short, not the 9, 10 days, etc., masterful training, but maybe we should offer a short 2, maybe 3 days of breaking the status quo. Because it sounds like poor product managers getting a product. Management wants probably to manage this product the way they manage every other product before it.
That's
the
correct.
Formula, especially the big ones. And it's not going to break the status quo unless the product is so innovative, which it's not going to be because major companies don't have those innovations, they have improvements. So breaking the status quo is the skill of competing.
It is.
So what do you think about starting a program, you and I, 2 or 3 days geared toward those people who need to break the status quo, rather than have a very deep knowledge of how to run a competitive intelligence function?
So all the stuff I've learned from you over the last few years is actually the thrust of where, even within my company, what we're trying to do is break those status quos. We're trying to open up their eyes to seeing things. And I think it's needed, but there's also an understanding about how a company's internal politics work. And that's going to change from company to companies. But I think the basic concept of breaking the status quo is valid, especially in larger companies, because that's where everybody struggles, because people are comfortable. They know what they're doing, or at least they think they know what they're doing. And even if they're losing market share quarter over quarter, year over year, until it gets to a point where it's just dire straits and it's too late, game over at that point, they're not going to change. And so part of this is showing them how to identify and break the status quo in a way that's positive. You know, even I talked about negative framing and positive framing. I think that's something that is a critical skill that people should learn, because that's what helps change that barrier.
I 100% agree that the implicit message in what you're saying is that it's not enough to give the tool. I can teach the tools of how to look at the market, where it's changing, etc. I cannot teach them how to break the status quo. That has to come from them with their ideas, but I can give them a kind of the soil on which to grow their creative thinking, but the real skill will be in getting management to agree.
So one of the things, if you remember back to the session back earlier this year in Colorado, one of the things that you talked about that had a lot of impact, and I heard from several people in the workshop, they said that they had never thought about, because you brought up the status quo at that session, they said they had never thought about it in that context. They had never thought about the framing and how do I get my executive to change, and negative framing may make them move a little bit, but not enough to change the status quo, just enough to eliminate the discomfort. But when you talked about positive framing and how to set that up, people were going like, I hadn't thought about it that way, and that's really going to be impactful. I heard from 3 or 4 people who attended your workshop and said that was the best part because it was so insightful and it made them think critically about how to approach their own internal politics.
Well, I have 2 things to say about it. First of all, thank you. Second, the people who attended my workshop were old-timers, mostly, if you remember. People who are very seasoned, etc. What we need to influence are the younger product managers who are struggling with management to say, just execute. But here is the last question, because we are almost at the end. You say the positive approach versus the negative approach. I'm by nature a negative, cranky old man. You know it. Everybody knows it. You are by nature a positive optimist. Maybe this was the reason for this podcast, because together you have plus and minus and you get neutral. All right. Any thoughts for the end of this? It's going to be 30 minutes. I'm going to post it. We're going to see if we get any responses. But any last thoughts before we terminate this conversation?
No, I think your idea about the offering a class is a good thing, and we should explore that once we're done talking here.
Yeah, we'll explore it, because, as I said, as a negative person, I see the end of the standalone position because of all the stupid things about AI, which has nothing to do with reality. But you see less and less enthusiasm for the standalone and more embedding it in other functions. So yes, once this conversation is over, we're going to start talking real time about how do we fashion this program and offer it as quickly as we can before I'm dead or something along those lines. Jay, thanks so much. We'll do it again probably once a month. Ciao.
See ya.